Open this damn door, Tyler. You think you can just walk away like that? I could hear my daughter, Melissa, shouting through the thin apartment walls, her voice slurred, cracking with rage. The sound of glass shattering followed, echoing through the night like a gunshot. Then came the silence, the kind of silence that isn't peace, but danger. I remember gripping my phone tighter, standing outside her door, frozen. My name is Caroline Miller, I'm from Portland, Oregon, and that night, God help me, was the night everything I thought I knew about my family fell apart. Love is supposed to protect. Love is supposed to nurture. But sometimes, the people we love the most become the very reason we kneel on the cold floor at 2 a.m., praying for a miracle. I had no idea that just hours later, my 7-year-old grandson would call me, whispering those words that would haunt me for the rest of my life, "Grandma, I'm hungry. Mom won't wake up." He locked me in. But before that call came, I was standing at that same door, listening to a fight that I'd been pretending didn't exist for months. Melissa had changed since she met Evan, that man who smiled with charm but carried darkness behind his eyes. I told her once, "Baby, something about him isn't right," but she just laughed, called me dramatic. Now, I stood there, listening to his voice thunder through the apartment like a storm. "You think you can take my son away from me?" he roared. My heart stuttered. His son? That child was mine before it was ever his. I raised that boy when Melissa was working nights, when she was lost in grief, when she was too tired to be a mother. Then I heard it, a slap. Followed by a crash. My knees went weak. I wanted to burst through the door, but my fear paralyzed me. What if I made it worse? What if she got hurt because of me? I remember whispering to myself, "Not again, Lord, please not again." You see, sometimes, when we ignore the small signs, they grow into tragedies that swallow everything. I ignored the bruises she hid with makeup. I ignored the late-night call she didn't answer. I ignored my instincts, because I wanted to believe she was happy. When the yelling stopped, I heard a door slam and heavy footsteps fade away. I waited, 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, before knocking softly. "Melissa?" I called. No answer. Just the hum of the fridge and the faint whimper of a child somewhere inside. I pressed my ear against the door and heard Ethan, my grandson, crying quietly, saying, "Mommy, please get up." My blood turned cold. I tried the doorknob. Locked. That's when I started pounding on the door. "Melissa. Melissa, open the door right now." No sound. Panic clawed at my chest. I ran down the hall to the building manager's office, but it was empty. Midnight on a Friday, no one around. By the time I came back, the lights inside had gone dark. I called her cell phone. Straight to voicemail. I told myself she just needed space, that maybe they'd both cooled off and gone to bed. But in my gut, I knew something was wrong. I should have broken that door down. I should have called the police. But mothers, they always think they can fix things quietly, without making it worse. I drove home that night convincing myself tomorrow would be better. It wasn't. Around 2:14 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something in me said, "Pick up." And then I heard it. A tiny, trembling voice. "Grandma. I'm hungry." I froze. "Ethan? Baby, where's Mommy?" There was a pause. "She won't wake up," he whispered, his voice breaking. "He locked me in. I can't get out. It's dark." My heart shattered. I dropped my coffee mug, the sound exploding across the floor, but I didn't even notice. "Ethan, listen to me," I said, my voice shaking. "Don't hang up, okay? Don't hang up." I grabbed my keys, ran barefoot to the car, not even caring that it was pouring rain outside. Every red light was a curse. Every second felt like a lifetime. When I reached the apartment, the street was empty except for the flickering street light. I ran up 3 flights of stairs, pounding on her door again. "Ethan. Baby, it's Grandma. Can you hear me? I could hear him crying, muffled behind the door. I tried the knob again, still locked. I called 911 with trembling hands. My grandson is locked inside, his mother's unresponsive, please, please hurry. The operator told me to stay calm, but how do you stay calm when your family is on the other side of a door you can't open? I pressed my head against it, whispering prayers I hadn't said in years. It's gonna be okay, baby. Grandma's here. I could hear him whispering back, I'm scared. That broke me. Completely. When the police finally arrived, I stepped back as they broke the door open. The moment they entered, I knew. I saw the look on the first officer's face, eyes heavy, jaw tight. I followed them inside, ignoring their orders to wait outside. And there she was, my daughter, lying on the floor, motionless. Her hair tangled, her face pale. Evan was gone. Ethan ran straight into my arms, shaking, sobbing. He said I was bad, he cried. He said Mommy was sleeping. I held him tighter, whispering, no, baby, no, you did nothing wrong. Tears blurred my vision, but I kept rocking him, back and forth, as the paramedics knelt beside her. They worked in silence for what felt like forever, then one of them looked up at me and slowly shook his head. My legs gave out. I dropped to the floor, still holding Ethan. My baby was gone. My daughter, my only child, was gone. And all that was left was a terrified little boy who had seen too much of this world already. That night changed everything. It taught me that silence is dangerous. That love without boundaries can kill. And that sometimes, the bravest thing a mother, or a grandmother, can do is stop pretending everything is fine and speak up before it's too late. So if you're listening right now, if you've heard the screams, seen the bruises, the next morning, the sun rose like it always does, heartless, golden, shining on broken things as if pretending nothing happened. I sat in that hospital waiting room, my hands trembling, clutching Ethan's tiny backpack against my chest. They had taken him for a checkup, saying he was fine physically. Physically. But I knew the damage inside his little heart would take years to heal. I could still hear his voice echoing in my head, Grandma, I'm hungry. He locked me in. I wanted to scream. I wanted to destroy something. But all I could do was sit there, shaking, waiting for someone to tell me how to breathe again. A detective approached me, tall man, graying at the temples, eyes that looked tired from seeing too much. Mrs. Miller? He asked softly. I nodded. He sat beside me, notebook in hand. We're treating your daughter's death as an overdose, he said. The words cut through me like ice. Overdose? I repeated. You think my daughter did that to herself? He looked at me, unreadable. There were signs, empty pill bottles, alcohol, no sign of forced entry. My chest burned. No sign of forced entry because he had the key. I snapped. Her boyfriend, Evan. He did this. I told her he was dangerous. But he only sighed, closed his notebook, and said, we'll look into it. That phrase, we'll look into it, is the lie people tell you when they've already decided not to care. Ethan came out holding a juice box, his small hand gripping the nurse's fingers. When he saw me, he ran into my arms again. Can I go home now, Grandma? He whispered. My throat closed up. Yes, baby. You're coming home with me. I looked at the nurse, who nodded quietly. She understood. I could see it in her eyes, that silent compassion only women who've seen too much pain can give. I wrapped him in my coat and walked out into the parking lot, where the world looked the same, but mine had ended. For the next few days, I lived in autopilot. Every night, Ethan woke up crying, sometimes screaming for his mom. I'd hold him close, stroke his hair, whispering, she's with the angels now, sweetheart. But every time I said it, I felt a dagger twist in my chest. Angels. God. Heaven. It all sounded too easy for the cruelty of what had happened. And every time I closed my eyes, I saw Evan's face, calm, smug, untouchable. He hadn't even shown up at the hospital. Not once. The funeral came and went like a blur of rain and wilted flowers. I stood by her coffin, holding Ethan's hand, and I swore I would not rest until he paid for what he did. I knew in my bones my daughter didn't overdose. She was trying to get away from him. She'd been saving money, planning to move. I found the envelopes hidden in her dresser when I cleaned her apartment. She had written in shaky handwriting, "For Ethan's new school." Tell me, does that sound like someone planning to die? After the funeral, as the crowd thinned, I saw him, Evan, standing at a distance, sunglasses on, hands in his pocket, like he was attending some stranger's burial. My blood boiled. I walked straight toward him, my heels sinking into the muddy grass. "You have the nerve to come here?" I spat. He didn't even flinch. "Caroline," he said, too calmly, "this is a tragedy for all of us." I wanted to slap that smug calm off his face. "Don't you dare say her name," I hissed. "You destroyed her." He smirked slightly. "You always needed someone to blame, didn't you?" That was it. I lunged at him before anyone could stop me. My hands gripped his collar as years of anger poured out of me. "You hurt her. You locked that child up." I screamed. A couple of people ran over, pulling me back. He only straightened his jacket, adjusted his glasses, and whispered, "Careful, old lady. You don't want to make false accusations." False accusations. Those words echoed through me long after he walked away. That's how men like him win, they twist the truth until everyone doubts what's real. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee, staring at the file of papers the detective had given me. Autopsy report, cause of death, accidental overdose. I slammed the folder shut. No. Not accidental. Not her. I opened my laptop and started searching everything I could: domestic abuse reports, custody laws, case precedents. If the police wouldn't fight for my daughter, I would. I was a grandmother, but I was about to become something else entirely, a warrior with nothing left to lose. The next morning, I went to the precinct again. "Detective Hale," I said, standing at his desk. "Reopen the case." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Mrs. Miller, we don't have enough evidence." I slammed the envelope onto his desk, photos of Melissa's bruises, old text messages where she begged him to leave her alone, and a voicemail she left me 2 weeks before her death: "Mom, if anything happens to me, promise me you'll protect Ethan." Hale looked at me, then at the evidence. "You should have brought this sooner," he murmured. "I didn't know she was in that much danger." I cried. "But now you do. So do something." He promised to forward it to the DA's office. But promises are cheap currency in a world that doesn't value women's pain. Days passed, and nothing happened. No calls. No updates. Just silence. Meanwhile, Evan had already filed for visitation rights. He wanted to see Ethan. Over my dead body. When the papers came, I tore them open, shaking. Petition for paternal visitation. My vision blurred with rage. How could a man who locked a child in a room and left his mother to die have the right to anything? I called my lawyer friend, Margaret, who had known Melissa since she was little. "They'll try to prove he's stable," she said. "If he gets a good lawyer, you could lose custody." I gripped the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. "Then I'll fight with everything I have." That night, I went to Ethan's room. He was sitting on the bed, hugging his teddy bear. "Grandma," he whispered, "do I have to see him again?" My heart broke. "No, sweetheart. Never again. Not if I can help it." He looked up at me, eyes wide, voice trembling. "He said Mommy fell asleep because she was bad." Was she bad? Tears filled my eyes. I knelt beside him, holding his face in my hands. "No, baby. Mommy wasn't bad. She was brave. She tried to save you." He nodded slowly, and for the first time in days, he smiled faintly. That smile became my armor. My reason to breathe. My reason to fight. From that night on, I stopped being afraid of men like Evan. I started documenting everything, every threat, every message, every memory. I started talking to advocacy groups, lawyers, anyone who would listen. If the system wouldn't protect my daughter, then maybe, just maybe, I could make sure it protected someone else's. And as I tucked Ethan in that night, I whispered a promise I intended to keep until my last breath: I'm going to make sure he never hurts another soul again. Courtrooms are supposed to be places of justice. But that morning, as I stood there clutching Ethan's hand, it felt more like a battlefield. The air was cold, sterile, and filled with whispers that carried judgment. Across the aisle sat Evan, in a crisp suit, smirking like he'd already won. I could almost hear him thinking, "You're just a tired old woman. No one will believe you." But he didn't know what it means for a grandmother to fight for blood, for the last living piece of her daughter. The judge entered, and everyone rose. My knees trembled, but I stood tall. I kept my gaze locked on Evan, daring him to look away first. My lawyer, Margaret, whispered, "Stay calm, Caroline. He's going to provoke you." I nodded, though rage was already burning under my skin. When Evan took the stand, he began his performance: soft voice, fake tears, words carefully chosen like a rehearsed script. "I loved Melissa," he said. "She struggled, but I never stopped trying to help her. I just want what's best for my son." My stomach turned. He said it so easily, like he believed it. The lies rolled off his tongue smoother than truth ever could. When it was my turn, I stepped forward, my heart pounding. "Your Honor," I began, my voice trembling but strong, "my daughter didn't overdose. She was trying to escape this man. He abused her, isolated her, controlled every part of her life. And when she tried to leave, she didn't make it out alive." Evan's lawyer jumped up immediately. "Objection. Speculation." The judge raised a hand, silencing him. "Mrs. Miller, do you have evidence to support that?" I reached into my folder and held up the photos, the bruises on Melissa's arms, the messages where she said, "He won't let me go." The courtroom went silent. Even the stenographer stopped typing for a second. "She told me," I said softly, "that she was afraid. And she begged me to protect her son if anything happened to her." My voice cracked. "That's why I'm here. Because love shouldn't die in silence." Evan's lawyer leaned back, smirking. "Mrs. Miller, are you aware that your daughter had a history of anxiety and prescription use?" I stared him down. "You mean the medication she took because of him?" The room buzzed. The lawyer tried to twist my words, painting me as emotional, unstable, obsessed. It's funny how the truth always sounds messy compared to lies wrapped in calm tones and expensive suits. When the judge called for recess, I walked past Evan. He leaned close, his voice low. "You can't win this, Caroline. The system doesn't believe people like you." I froze, my jaw tightening. "Maybe not," I said, "but it believes evidence. And I have something you didn't destroy." His smirk faltered for just a second. That was all I needed. That night, after putting Ethan to bed, I went through Melissa's old phone again. I'd looked through it 100 times, but this time, I searched deeper: hidden folders, backups, audio memos. And then I found it, a voice recording, dated 3 days before her death. My hand shook as I pressed play. "Evan," her voice whispered, shaky, scared. "Please, stop yelling. Ethan's watching. You're scaring him. I just need space, okay? I'm leaving tomorrow." Then a man's voice, his voice, cold, sharp, venomous: "If you walk out that door, you'll regret it." My breath caught. That was it. Proof. Proof that she didn't plan to die. She planned to live. The next morning, I took it straight to Detective Hale. He listened in silence, his face growing pale. When it ended, he exhaled slowly. "This changes everything," he said. "We can push for a reclassification." Finally, I thought. Finally, someone was listening. But justice is never easy. Evan had money, lawyers, and a reputation. I had only truth, and a 7-year-old boy who still woke up screaming in the night. At the next hearing, we played the recording. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. The judge's expression hardened. Evan's lawyer stammered. For the first time, the mask cracked. He stood up, shouting, "That's taken out of context." But the judge slammed his gavel. "Enough. Sit down." I could see the panic in Evan's eyes, the first hint of fear. The kind of fear men like him feel only when they realize they've lost control. When the hearing ended, the judge postponed the visitation decision pending further investigation. It wasn't victory yet, but it was the first step toward it. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. I didn't answer any. I just held Ethan's hand and whispered, "We did it, baby." Mommy's voice finally spoke for herself. That night, I watched him sleep, peaceful for the first time in weeks. And for the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt since the night of the call, hope. But hope, I've learned, is fragile. Because evil doesn't give up easily. 2 weeks later, I came home from work to find my front door slightly open. My heart stopped. I stepped inside slowly, every instinct on alert. The living room was quiet, but something felt wrong. Then I saw it, Ethan's teddy bear on the floor, his backpack gone. Panic exploded in my chest. I called his name. Nothing. I called again, louder. Silence. And then I saw the note on the table, written in black marker. "You should have stayed quiet. He's with me now." My scream filled the house. The cup in my hand shattered on the floor. I grabbed the phone and dialed 911, my voice breaking. "He took him. Evan took my grandson." As I waited for the sirens, shaking, crying, I realized something deep and terrifying. This wasn't just about justice anymore. This was war. And I would burn the world down to bring Ethan home. They told me to wait for the police and let them handle it, like I was some frail relic who couldn't see the dangers breathing in the same room. I stayed on the phone with Detective Hale until my voice was raw, until he promised he was doing everything, but promises are thin paper when a child's life is on the line. I refused to sit still while someone I loved disappeared into the hands of a man who smiled in public and controlled in private, so I became someone I barely recognized, relentless, furious, and impossible to ignore. Margaret tried to calm me down, to remind me of court orders and the law, but the law moves at the speed of paperwork, not the speed of a ticking clock in a terrified 7-year-old's chest. I packed a bag of essentials for Ethan and shoved it into the back of my car like armor. I taped photos of him and Melissa to the dashboard and drove into the night with nothing but a prayer and a map of places Evan might hide him. The city looked different at 2 a.m., shadows were deeper, strangers more suspect, and every honk sounded like bad news. I started where the evidence pointed, Evan's old apartment, his mother's house, the cheap motel off the interstate where he'd once stayed when he needed time to think. I knocked on doors until people stopped answering, peered into windows until my own reflection made me dizzy, and asked questions that bruised my throat from repeating. Some people shut me down with a look, the kind that says, "Mind your business," and others gave me crumbs of truth. I saw a man with a little boy last week. He was with a woman who looked scared. They left in a black SUV. Each lead felt like the pulse of possibility until it fizzled, but I kept walking, because what else was there to do but walk until my feet bled for the one who couldn't bleed for himself? I slept in my car a few nights, the seat folded back into a bed, Ethan's teddy beside me like a talisman that smelled faintly of his hair. In those lonely hours I whispered to the dark, promising a grandmother's kind of violence if anyone hurt him. Margaret arranged for a private investigator with gray hair and a softer voice than mine. His name was Luis, and he showed me maps and documents as if he'd been waiting all his life to help someone tear lies apart. Luis didn't offer platitudes, he offered a plan: shadow surveillance, license plate tracing, social media mining. Watching him work was like watching a chess player see 3 moves ahead, and for the first time since Ethan was taken, I felt like someone was holding an edge of the map when I had been groping for the coastline. We found small things that mattered: a photo from a friend's wedding where Evan's sunglasses reflected the motel sign, a receipt for a diner where a child had left a crayon drawing. Those tiny breadcrumbs became proof of movement, and movement meant hope. I plastered missing person flyers across grocery stores and laundromats, handed them to moms at school pickup lines, and begged shopkeepers to call if they saw a black SUV with a dent on the passenger door. The next break came at dawn, with a call from Luis that made my hands shake so hard I could barely hold the phone. He was seen in the industrial district, Luis told me. His voice was steady but urgent. I drove there like a woman blown by a storm, tires sighing on wet pavement, the city waking with indifferent lights. We scoured warehouses that smelled of oil and old dreams, peered into yards full of forgotten appliances, and asked men who wiped their hands on their jeans if they'd seen a little boy with a scraped knee. One of them pointed to a cluster of shipping containers behind a shuttered factory and said, "There was a kid. Couple days ago." We moved like ghosts, quiet and focused, creeping into corners where criminals hide like cockroaches. Every shadow became possible salvation and every sound a threat. When we finally found the black SUV, it was half buried beneath a canopy of industrial vines, license plate bent like a secret. My heart thudded so loud I thought it would push my ribs apart. Luis and I moved in, and beneath the back seat we found a crumpled juice box, a smear of jelly on the upholstery, and a single tiny shoelace tied in a childlike knot. I pressed the jolt of reality into my mouth and tasted iron, the delicious ache of hope mixed with dread. We called Detective Hale. He arrived with a team, polite and brisk like men who had practiced calm in the face of chaos. Inside me, a war raged, a part that wanted to celebrate and a part that knew the worst was never over until the child slept in my arms again. They traced the SUV to an abandoned safe house on the outskirts of town, a place Evan had used before for private weekends. It smelled like damp and old cigarettes, the kind of place that erases names. We surrounded it like a prayer circle, flashlights cutting the dark into thin blue strips. When they burst in, the room was empty except for a pair of sneakers by the door and a blanket tossed over a chair. I remember the room as a photograph, the sunlight slanting in, the dust motes like suspended confessions, the tiny shoe prints on the threshold. Not there. Not yet. Luis held my shoulder, steadying me as if I might unravel. Detective Hale found a note in the trash, scrawled in Evan's neat hand, "Gone for a while. Don't follow." He laughed, a short ugly sound. "He's taunting us," Hale said. "He wants to be caught." Evan was smart enough to stay one step ahead, and cruel enough to make each step a test. Weeks folded into each other. I spent my days in a tangle of phone calls, interviews, and stakeouts, and my nights lying awake listening for the echo of small feet on the stairs. People started to whisper when they saw me, the grieving grandmother turned vigilante, and some offered help while others offered me pity like a bandage. The DA called to say they were building a stronger subpoena. There were motions and counter. When I walked out of that hospital room, my legs felt like they'd been carved from glass, one wrong step, and I'd shatter. The air was cold, the kind that bites through your jacket and your pride, and for a moment, I just stood there staring at the night sky, asking silently, why did it have to come to this? But then, I remembered the voice that started it all, that trembling cry on the phone, "Grandma, I'm so hungry." He locked me. "Mom won't wake up." That voice became my fire. That night, I swore no child in my family, no child anywhere, would ever be silenced by fear again. 2 days later, the court hearing began. The small-town courthouse was packed tighter than a church on Sunday. Reporters whispered, flashing cameras every time I moved. Across the aisle sat Ethan, my daughter's boyfriend, the man who had trapped my grandson in that dark, locked room. He looked smug, dressed sharp, pretending like the world owed him sympathy. But when I looked at him, all I saw was the image of my grandson clutching his empty stomach, tears drying on his cheeks as he begged for help that never came. I took a deep breath and walked to the witness stand. My hands trembled as I raised them, but my voice was steady. "My name is Margaret Ellis. I'm the grandmother of 7-year-old Liam Brooks, and I am here to speak for a child who was too afraid to speak for himself." The judge nodded, and suddenly, Everything I'd bottled up for years came spilling out, the missed signs, the bruises, the way my daughter had changed since she met that man. He isolated her, I said, voice thick with emotion. Made her believe she wasn't good enough. He told her I was the enemy. And when she finally found the courage to fight back, he punished her, and my grandson, for it. The courtroom fell silent except for the sound of muffled crying. Even the reporters put down their cameras. When the defense tried to paint him as a stressed man who made a mistake, I leaned forward, eyes locked on his. A mistake? I said, my voice sharp as glass. A mistake doesn't leave a child starving behind a locked door. A mistake doesn't leave bruises that take weeks to fade. That's not stress, that's cruelty. After my testimony, I walked back to my seat and found Liam sitting there, tiny hands folded in his lap. He smiled when he saw me, small, brave, pure. He didn't understand the legal words being thrown around, but he understood love. He leaned into me, whispering, "Grandma, are we going home after this?" And I whispered back, "Yes, sweetheart. This time, you're going home for good." When the verdict came, it was like time froze. The judge's gavel struck once. Guilty. The word echoed across the courtroom like a hymn. Ethan's smirk vanished, replaced with a hollow stare. My daughter, sitting pale and trembling, finally broke down in tears, not of guilt, but of release. It was over. Outside, the cold morning sun washed over us. Liam ran into my arms, giggling for the first time in months. He held on to me like he was afraid I'd disappear, and I held him tighter, promising silently that I never would. My daughter walked up to us, fragile, ashamed, but free. "Mom," she whispered, "I didn't listen when you warned me. I thought love meant staying no matter what. I was wrong." I cupped her face gently and said, "Love doesn't mean pain, sweetheart. It means safety. It means family." That night, we went home, my home. I made pancakes for dinner because Liam said breakfast food tasted like happy. He laughed when the syrup spilled, and I didn't even care about the mess. My daughter watched us, tears glistening, her hand over her heart. For the first time, there was peace at our table. Weeks passed. My daughter started therapy, slowly rebuilding her strength. Liam began sleeping without nightmares. And me? I started something new, a small foundation to help children in crisis. I named it the Liam Project. Every time I saw his smile on our flyers, I knew we were turning pain into purpose. One evening, I sat by the porch, rocking gently as the sun dipped below the trees. Liam came running out with a crayon drawing, stick figures of us holding hands, a house behind us, and a big heart floating above. "That's us, Grandma," he said proudly. "No more locked doors." I hugged him tight, and tears slipped down my cheeks. "That's right, baby," I whispered. "No more locked doors. Not for you. Not for anyone." Then I looked straight into the invisible eyes of anyone who might be listening, the mothers, the grandmothers, the teachers, the neighbors, and I said what I wish someone had said sooner. If you ever hear a child crying for help, don't wait. Don't assume someone else will step in. Because sometimes, you are that someone. And one call, one visit, one knock on a door can save a life. Because that's the truth, sometimes heroes aren't the ones wearing capes or badges. Sometimes, they're just tired grandmothers who refuse to stop loving. And if my story teaches you anything, let it be this: family isn't just who you're born to. It's who shows up when the world turns dark. Real love protects. Real strength speaks up. And silence, silence.